We're going to begin the program now. My name is Lolita DaVine. I am a producer at BNN TV and also a media correspondent at touchfm.org, which is a local radio station here in Boston. We were going to be watching some information from Petra, and which will give you a little bit of information about Common Core. However, Common Core, from what I know, is something that our community really needs to pay attention to, and to get to know more about it is one of the standards under President Obama's initiative that replaces impasse. And we're here to learn more about how that will impact our families. I'm the moderator today, and I first would like to welcome you all, but more than that, bring the lady who's bringing this dynamic information to us, Petra of Petra's Destinee, to give you a welcome.
Good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome to this evening's forum. And this is meant to be something that we want to make sure that our neighbors and our families know about what is happening in our schools. Unfortunately, I know that this time we have to want the best for our children. And right now we have a school-to-prison pipeline that's operating in our school system right now. And for the Common Core to come in, it's just going to make that even just a lot more harder for our children to understand what's going on. One, I just spoke to some teachers today. They're saying that it's a very, very hard thing because their jobs are placed on the line with this. Okay, their jobs are placed on the line with this. Not only that, they have to teach to children who don't understand Common Core, don't understand anything about it, don't understand how to read, don't understand how to do the basic stuff. And so now they have to put all that information into these children, and they're teaching to the test. So we have wonderful women here, mighty women, who have done research, who have done so much so that we can understand exactly the big picture. We want to know what's going on, the history. We want to know why Common Core is what it really is. And we want to know about the ELA and whatever else, the math, those kind of things. That's going to affect and impact our children for generations. And if we can stop Common Core, that is our goal today. And each one, reach one, I'm sure that you all will understand when I say this is more important than life itself. Education is number one. It is the key to anything else. And if they can stop us from getting education, then that is why they're building supermax prisons. Okay? You see those supermax prisons? That's what they're doing. They said in 3rd grade, if you cannot read, then you are going to jail. Okay? They've already pegged us in that. So therefore, we don't want to see that anymore. We want to see something that's better for our children, that they can learn and read and write and not only do the 2-year college, but we want them to go on to whatever college they want to, 4 years in technical sciences, whatever. But I don't want to limit our children. So with that, I thank you and I welcome my sisters over here, Sandra Stotsky and Alliegro. And thank you so much for coming so far just to be a part of this forum. Thank you very much and God bless you.
Okay, here we go, and we're excited that you all are here. I'm the moderator tonight, and tonight our program will go under this guideline. We'll have we have scheduled Rachel Kemp. She's not here yet, so we're going to be presented for 30 minutes by Sandra Stotsky. She's a professor of education. After that, we'll be hearing from Alliegro, who is a Liberty Chalkboard. After that, we'll have questions from our audience, and I'll have 2 questions of our panelists in addition to questions from our audience. Those 2 questions, the first question will be, what are the solutions? So keep that into your minds. And we hope that the information we give you tonight is information that you'll pass on to others. I believe personally that this Common Core standard is something that we need to understand in order to be informed about what is given and disseminated to the children in the state of Massachusetts. So without any further ado, I am going to pull up my first bio here and introduce our first guest. Let's see if this is going to work.
I can always add for you.
Well, and that actually makes a lot of sense. So come right up.
Okay, then.
Let's welcome our first guest.
Thank you. This is somebody else's up here. Am I supposed to leave that there? Okay. Just want to make sure. I don't go around with a lot of high-tech equipment, so I'm just going to be sure. First of all, I think this should be a little lower. Sure. That's better. Okay. All of you can, if I can be heard or whatever I need to be acoustically, then it's fine. That's about where it is. Thank you. I'm actually one of the people who had maybe the shortest distance to come. I had to just come from Brookline and figure out how to get into Tremont Street and then over to Warren Street and to the library. I think it's a great idea to hold a meeting in the library. Let me just move this up a little bit. Thank you. Let me briefly introduce myself. I am, as you heard, Sandra Stotsky, and I used to be in the Massachusetts Elementary and Secondary Education Department, where I reported to former Commissioner David Driscoll and to Chairman of the Board of Education at that time, who was James Pizer, now our Secretary of Education, appointed by Governor Baker. So he's just switched his particular position. But when I was in the department, I was in charge of all the standards we were revising. And want me to use that? Oh, okay, I hear the echoing sound. Fine. I'm supposed to talk, I gather, a little bit about ELA standards and a little bit about math. My background is actually in reading from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, because I trained under Jean Chall, who was known at that time as Miss Phonics. I know a lot about beginning reading. But what I really want to say is that the standards we developed in 2000 to 2003 were the standards that propelled all kids in Massachusetts to the very top, #1 in both math and in ELA on our National Assessment of Educational Progress tests, NAEP as it's called. And these are tests that are called the Nation's Report Card. Those standards helped to get all kids to improve. Why were they aimed that way? And that's the first big difference with Common Core that I want to tell you a little bit about, because in the department at that time we were following a philosophy that came out of the Massachusetts Education Reform Act in 93-94. That Reform Act was probably the best piece of progressive legislation ever written on education reform. It was written by Tom Birmingham, at that time Senate President, by Mark Roosevelt, who at that time was chair of the House Education Committee, and by Governor William Weld, that time governor, and as you now know, he is on the Libertarian Party list of candidates for vice president, for president, the national level. At that time, he was the governor of the state and one of the 3 key people who wrote this fabulous Education Reform Act, which when I came into the department in '99, I was to basically administer and supervise the revision of the K-12 standards and to do a lot of revision of teacher licensing regulations and tests. So I was very busy administering the law that these 3 men had put together and was quite an achievement in '93, '94. For English language arts, we produced a set of K-12 standards that were among the best in the country. Let me go back again to the philosophy behind what we were doing, because it applied to both English language arts and to mathematics. Our goal was to raise all kids' academic achievement through the standards. It was not to close gaps. We were given the charge of raising everybody. That's a different direction. And we succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. All demographic groups in the state improved, starting with 2005 on a test that was independent of anything we could manipulate in the state, the NAEP, the National Report Card, the NAEP test. Our kids hit the top. Our average, in other words, was higher than any other state average in math, in reading, in grade 4, and in grade 8. What more could one ask for? And then when we registered as a separate country for TIMSS, Trends International Mathematics and Science Survey or Study, we were tied for first place on science in grade 8 with Singapore. In other words, our average was that high. And we were among the top 6 countries, we had registered as a separate country, in both grade 4 and grade 8 math. So we knew we had good standards. But, like all good things, they just didn't last through the Common Core avalanche, which took place in 2010 when the State Board of Education, under the direction of, at that time, Governor Patrick, who had been elected in '06, the Board of Education decided to dump our first-class English and first-class math standards in favor of Common Core's standards, which had been developed by some private organizations in Washington, D.C. Now, I happen to have been on the State Board of Education at that time. I had retired from the Department of Education in '03 and had been appointed by outgoing Governor Romney in '06 and was on the State Board of Ed at the time. Why did we junk the best standards in the country overall? Because we had been offered by Race to the Top $250 million. We all knew that it was a question of money that was being dangled, and you couldn't turn down the money. So our standards had to go. Massachusetts lost its best standards, and even though you have had Common Core's standards being implemented for the past 5 years, we still don't have any evidence that they're doing anybody any good. Nobody. The idea behind Common Core, philosophically, was to close gaps. But instead, we see gaps increasing on NAEP tests. tests, the national tests, the nation's report card. We don't really know what's going on with the tests in the schools. That was why I was hoping there would be a teacher here from the Boston Public Schools, talk a little bit about whatever they know is going on in the schools. But nationally, we have no evidence that Common Core standards are helping low-achieving kids, low-income kids, or any of the low-achieving minority kids that they supposedly were designed to help. We do know that the standards we once had in Massachusetts improved, raised everybody. They're still within reach, and that is what the ballot question is going to be in November if we get a favorable decision in the next few weeks from the Supreme Judicial Court, because the Gates Foundation has given the MBAE, Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education, sorry about all these titles and acronyms, but they were given a lot of money by the Gates Foundation, which has invested in Common Core. Not sure why. Only Bill Gates could tell you, really, why he wants to keep throwing good money after bad, since many states, about half, are trying to get out of Common Core, but they're finding that they're all locked in. But the MBAE filed a lawsuit against the constitutionality of our ballot question in January, filed the lawsuit with Foley Hogue in Boston, one of the priciest law firms in Boston, in the country, internationally. They get about $700 an hour, maybe even more. And the lawsuit was filed with the Attorney General's office to see whether our ballot question is actually constitutional. Now, what are some of the problems with these Common Core standards? And I'm just going to talk a little bit about those, because I don't expect you to remember a whole long list of problems. I know what was good about our previous standards. Philosophically, they were challenging, but they could be taught easily by teachers who had been trained in their subject areas adequately. And indeed, they taught them without any expensive professional development, just the usual professional development. The teacher evaluation link for Common Core is still in dispute. What Race to the Top was trying to do was link student scores, and you'll still see this discussed and argued about, but it was designed to link student scores to teacher evaluations. Well, most teachers weren't happy with that because they didn't like the idea in general, and it's never been done before. In most countries in the world, students are accountable for their own scores. And we're the only country that has tried a movement to link student scores to teacher evaluations. And what does it lead to? Why is it a problem? It leads to a lot of teaching to the test. That's the problem. Once teachers think they're going to be evaluated by their kids' scores, they are going to then spend a lot of instructional time in the classroom, because you have to understand the motivation. If you're a teacher and you know that you're going to be evaluated by how well your kids do on a test, you want them to do good on a test. So you spend a lot of time in the classroom teaching to the test. That takes away instructional time from the other things they should be doing. Sometimes it leads to a short-term gain, but we're also beginning right now to see studies that show that short-term gain doesn't mean much. It's long-term learning that matters. So if teachers have spent a lot of classroom instructional time teaching to the test, it robs their kids of time they should have learning more content. Because if we know anything about reading comprehension, or even math, you need to spend time practicing what you're learning. It's like sports, it's like playing a musical instrument. Practice is key. I say that because I am an amateur pianist as well. And I know that practice is what you have to do with a set of skills like reading or sports skills or musical skills. And if the teacher is concerned about a test, kids are not going to be given the class time they need on what they may need according to the teacher's judgment, because the teacher has to worry about a test that's going to be used to evaluate her. So we have a problem with that link. Even though there has been a revision of the No Child Left Behind Act that some of you may remember, that says that you can have more flexibility, they call it, at the state level. Somehow, states are still going to be responsible for figuring out how they'll be accountable for kids' scores. Accountability is the name of the game. And no one's against accountability if you're going to get federal money. But federal money is only 10% of the school budget for any community in general in this country. And while Boston may get federal grants and other kinds of money to help with remediation or special programs, most of the money still comes from local sources or state sources. And so there is a problem if you have this so-called loosening of accountability, but accountability is still there, and accountability is going to lead to pressure on teachers, because nobody seems to think that the pressure should be anywhere else. Who else? Think about it. Should be held accountable if kids don't do well on a test. You have to figure out that you have policymakers in Washington who want to blame somebody. They don't know who else to blame except the teacher, but it leads to problems in the classroom. ELA. One of the problems specifically of the standards, and I want to know, I'm looking for whoever the moderator is. She was here a minute ago. She went out there. She has to wave a card about a minute or two before I'm ready to finish, so I know when I finish. You'll tell me, okay. I don't want to go over my time because I usually need someone to just tell me it's, 3 to 5 minutes up or something like that. ELA and both math require a lot of writing, starting in kindergarten. And that has been one of the criticisms of Common Core, that it expects something that's developmentally inappropriate, as many early childhood educators have said. Too much writing. Math is not supposed to be a subject in which you do a lot of writing to begin with. But if you have a lot of writing and not enough reading, which is what all kids need, no matter where they live, more time needs to be spent on reading than writing, because where does good writing come from? It comes from a lot of good reading. How do you know what an English sentence looks like? You got to see one over and over and over again. And anyone who writes knows that you got to have an image in your mind of what a good sentence looks like, or what sentences need subjects, verbs, whatever else. But spending a lot of time on writing wastes a lot of valuable class time that should be spent on reading. So we have standards that are not going to be good for any group of kids in this country. I really still don't understand why we don't have more parent groups speaking up. We have Chamber of Commerce saying it's going to be wonderful for developing the workforce. We have professional education organizations all saying Common Core is good, mainly because they've been given Gates Foundation money. But we don't hear from grassroots parents groups. Why? Because most of them are protesting Common Core, and they're being dismissed by principals and superintendents. Let me say a few words about the math standards, because I have spent a lot of time on general and then ELA. Common Core's math standards have run into some other buzzsaws with teachers. Elementary teachers do not know how to teach these math standards very well. And while at first you might say, well, maybe that's the problem with the teachers, they need more professional development. No, the problem is with the standards themselves. They're not teacher-friendly or student-friendly. And as my friend on the validation committee, I was on Common Core's validation committee, and I was basically the content person for ELA standards because I knew them backwards and forwards. And one mathematician, there was only one on the validation committee, under 30 of us. Common Core's validation committee was not a large committee, and we were supposed to ensure that Common Core standards were internationally benchmarked, research-based, and rigorous. We didn't sign off because they weren't any of those three. And Professor Milgram, who teaches math at Stanford University, which is like our Harvard University, only it's on the West Coast. He's been there for 40 years. He goes with me to testify to state legislatures that Common Core's math standards will set us all back, because by the time kids finish high school, they will be 2 to 3 grades behind their peers in other countries. So they're not competitive. The problems begin in the elementary grades, where there are things called standard algorithms. These are the operations for doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, long division. These are all taught in high-achieving countries by the end of grade 2 to all kids. They're stretched out over 3 to 4 to 5 grades, so that by the time kids get to middle school, they're already a grade or 2 behind. And then by the time they're in high school, they'll be getting a test that says they're college ready if all they know is light algebra 2, which is how mathematicians describe it. Now, some people might say, oh, that's good. They don't have to know as much as kids elsewhere. So that'll be good for them if they can get into college, community college, or other colleges and get credit-bearing courses. The problem is that they're not going to be able to meet the competition from other countries. Kids are going to be coming in. Engineering colleges have to start at a higher level. So our kids won't be competitive, and it won't matter to many of the policymakers here because they're not concerned about competition from abroad so much as they're concerned about, quote, closing a gap at an equally low level. That's where I have been testifying, a few more minutes, for past 5 years. Why do we want to settle for equally low expectations for everybody when we had high expectations for everybody? All kids did better. If you have low expectations for everybody, we don't do better as a country, and kids don't do better. As Milgram has said, we may have the best educated ditch diggers in the world, Is that what we want? Maybe some of us want something different, but it's hard to get that something different. That's very briefly the problem with the math, that you have a lot of professional development that teachers need in order to understand the standards, and they gradually get weaker so that by the time you get to the end of high school, you're never going to be competitive with the kids graduating from real standards that are college-ready standards for colleges anywhere. I think I'm going to stop now so we have more time for the other two speakers, and I think we have two speakers now. Okay, good. Okay. Lolita, maybe I can give this back to you now.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Like I said before, we will have an opportunity to ask questions and take questions from our audience. So keep in mind things that you're hearing from the panelists, and be ready to throw out some tough questions so that we can get answers from our experts. Right now, I am seeing that Ms. Rachel V. Kemp has joined us. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Rachel is a lifelong resident of Dorchester and a product of the Boston Public School System. She holds a bachelor's degree of arts from Harvard College and a master's in public administration from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Rachel completed additional coursework at the Fletcher School of Law in Diplomacy and Tufts University. Rachel also completed the Commonwealth Institute program at the Sloan School of Management at MIT. Rachel currently works as an investment banker for a New York-based boutique investment bank. Rachel's career has also been highlighted in several C-level positions. These positions include a senior policymaker within the Economic Affairs Secretary, CEO of a predictive analytic company, founder and manager principal of a consulting focused on creating strategic and enhanced enterprise value for its portfolio companies, and finally, interim chief financial officer of an integrated communications company. The CFO position successfully focused on transforming a client's company into an attractive merger and acquisition opportunity. Rachel currently is a board member of the National Center for African American Artists and serves as the organizational development chair. She recently joined the board of the Energy Federation, Inc., an $18 million energy conservation company. Rachel is a member of the Parish of Saints Anglicans. Okay, and she finally is an avid amateur cellist and gardener. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. I think everyone can hear me. My voice has a very strange echo with a microphone. Oh, that is insistent that I use the microphone. And then I look at the camera. Here we go. So, we've already begun our presentations for the evening. And what we've been talking about so far, and for all of this evening, will be about education. We have experts. I'm not an expert in education. I've only experienced it. But when we talk about education, we're really talking about unalienable rights. And those are the rights given to us as American citizens. And let's underscore the term unalienable rights, because that's the term that actually defines our relationship to the Constitution and all things American. Will Smith, in the movie The Pursuit of Happiness, was so on point when he thought about how wise and forward-thinking Thomas Jefferson was when he wrote about these unalienable rights and the pursuit of happiness. And it's not happiness with an I, but happiness with a Y. And it makes a significant difference. Will Smith's character was an undereducated man trying to capture his part, his slice of that American dream. And his character was pursuing happiness with a Y. That special something that just embraces your total being. But his lack of education always stood in the way. He couldn't sell his equipment. He couldn't get his child into school. It was because of lack of education. So when we address the subject of education, just like the Will Smith character, we are pursuing happiness with a Y. In another life, I was the Assistant Secretary of Economic Affairs for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And I spent what I will call inordinate numbers of hours talking about the different economic strata that the Commonwealth was creating. And I'm not talking about 2 tiers of economic performance. I'm talking about 3, 4, maybe even 5 tiers that gave us institutionalized poverty. And the answer, no matter how the question was framed, always came back to education. Education is a right, and to be appropriately educated so that you can compete in the community, in the country of which you are a member, is something that cannot be taken away from you. Education is not only the door to competency, but it's the ability to compete and to grab not only my slice of the pie, but your slice, and your slice of that American dream. And to paraphrase just one other great American who spoke on a battlefield that changed the face of America. We too are standing on a great battlefield today. And we must continue to struggle so that all of the battles and the struggles that we will face will not be in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How's everyone feeling out here?
Good.
You get any information? Get any questions in order? Okay. Bear with me for 1 minute. Our next speaker and expert is Mary Ann Alliegro. She's a Liberty Chalkboard. She'll be speaking about the history of Common Core, the big picture, and where does Common Core really come from. Mary Ann has a bachelor's degree in biology from UMass Lowell and a master's in microbiology from the University of Maryland. Over 30 years experience in scientific research, including 7 years of senior research as a senior research associate at the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole. She has always been active in education through volunteer work, including 10 years coordinating a successful elementary and junior high science fair, teaching religious education and judging local, regional, and state science fairs, among other activities. Mary Ann is a wife and a mother, a Falmouth Town meeting member, participates in the Woods Hole Science and Technology Education Partnership as a science fair mentor, and is a member of the Liberty Chalkboard, an Upper Cape group dedicated to preserving our American freedom through education, enlightenment, and action. Without any further ado, let's receive Mary.
Thank you, Leslie, for that lovely introduction. I want to thank Petra so much. I know her as Claudette. And also my heroes in fighting Common Core, besides other Liberty Chalkboard members who are my heroes because they've done such amazing research. Sandra is one of my heroes. Also Peg Luxick and Donna Hearn, whose work we've used to come up with this presentation today. And Rachel, that was beautiful, everything you said. Thank you so much. You are also one of my heroes now. Okay, kids, I'm going to run to the back and just open up the program so we have a PowerPoint.
Is the mic on? It doesn't seem as loud.
I might not be holding it right, so I'll make sure I hear.
Just come out here.
Can someone does anyone know the password? It tells me. Okay.
It's probably the password.
It probably is. So rather than letting anybody wait till I'll just say the little introduction before, and as soon as we get the password, we'll start so that everybody isn't sitting there just looking at the screen. I have a slightly different approach to speaking about the Common Core than I started doing a few years ago when we first started speaking publicly for people, because the perpetrators, and I'm going to call them perpetrators because this is an evil thing that is being pushed on all of our children. They wanted us to discuss the talking points that they put forward so that we will be stuck in the mire and be deciding whether or not they're rigorous enough or whether or not they're going to bring our kids up to speed or etc. And we wouldn't be looking at the big picture of what's actually going on and understanding what they're doing. And that way they will have slipped this in and it's too late. So if I can explain a couple of things before they get started. One, I think everybody has figured out by now in all these decades that money will never fix what's wrong with our education system. Money isn't the point. Money is not what's going to fix it. Secondly, you need to understand another thing. The federal government or the state government does not have any money. They do not have one penny of money that they did not first take from you, and from you, and from you, and from you. So what they've done is they've taken your money, they've thinned it out quite a bit on the way, they're giving it back, a tiny bit of it, and making you sell your children to them. I want you to think about that as we talk and as we go forward. Please understand that. Okay, I'm going to say the first quote and we'll breeze through the slide when it comes because I also have a quote of a famous patriot. I'm going to say I have to say one thing before I do go further that I will say now since the slides aren't here. With the Liberty Chalkboard, we really are dedicated to education. We started out just with American history newsletters for children. We brought a bunch of them with us. They're called Under the Liberty Tree. Most of it is just simply quotes from our founding fathers or the words of our Star-Spangled Banner. Please take them home for your kids. And if any of you are teachers, you can take some home for your class to look at. They really are very attractive, and also they have a lot of good history on them. So please do. And anything on that table, except for the bound books, you're welcome to take. Okay. All right. Are we there yet? We're coming. Okay, it's down the little PowerPoint on the bottom, Dorothy. Right here. just click on that, double click, and then go up to play, or Patrick, can you get to it where it says to actually play the PowerPoint? Down the bottom? Thank you. They have to start, start at the first slide though. You wanted to say play from the beginning? Is this it right here? Or no? I think we have it. Yes? It's thinking. All right, we have it. Great. Okay, so that's us reviewing the web of Concord, what he's talking about. These are our website is libertychalkboard.org, and also the NCOM in Core, Massachusetts. I have it separate, so I want you to learn from the Liberty Chalkboard, and also Peg Luxick has a great website founded on truth. And I want you to act by going to NCOM in Core, Massachusetts, and seeing how you can help out at the state level. That's the consortium that everyone here is a part of, actually, many of the people here. Truth, not fiction. In God we trust. These are things that we hold dear at Liberty Chalkboard. Okay, dot, please. Next slide. Thank you. All right, here's one of my founding fathers, Patrick Henry. In 1788, he wanted to be sure that Virginia would not pass the Constitution. By the way, we have constitutions and Declaration of Independence over there in pocket size. Please take one for yourself or your family if you don't have them at home. He wanted to make sure that Virginia would not pass that without the Bill of Rights. Rachel spoke about unalienable rights. Those are the rights that come from God. And those are in those documents. Those are stated in those documents, also in our own Massachusetts Constitution, which I have a copy of over here. So what he said was, virtue shall slumber. The wicked will be continually watching, and consequently you will be undone. He warned them before he left the meeting. They didn't ratify until there was a Bill of Rights. I propose to you that that's what we're dealing with today with education. We have slumbered many, many years in this country, and the wicked have been watching, and they have crept into our educational system, and this is what's happening with our children. Next slide, please. Okay, so classical U.S. education has always been Bible-based, actually, from the beginning of our country, believe it or not. I have a copy of the New England Primer. Anybody can look at it. It's for language. It is full of Bible verse. It is full of Adam and Eve. It starts out with a prayer. Okay? This is how we taught our children. Our country was based on very strict Judeo-Christian principles, and they wanted... What was important about our education was that our founding fathers wanted citizens who could read the Bible for themselves. That way they knew what God was saying, would know that our rights come from God and not from the government. That's huge. Because if the rights come from the government, they can be taken away from the government, and we will never be a free people. And to understand that our unique form of government is a representative republic. We don't live in a democracy. Tyranny is how democracy always ends. We live in a representative republic where we do elect people to represent us, and then they are accountable to us the rest of the year. We can talk to them, we can call them, they have to help us. And so this education would ensure that we would always be striving towards and remaining a free nation. And that's what we're important. And I say striving towards because at the beginning we were not a totally free nation, and our founders knew that. Part of our nation was not free. They wanted our whole nation to become free. All right, how did this change? What happened? Well, danger. Danger. A man named Karl Marx had some really bad ideas. He wasn't from our country, but he thought that the education of all children from the moment that they can get along without a mother's care shall be in state institutions. He was, of course, the father of Marxism, which became communism. Socialism, you can call it whatever you like. It basically ends the same way. Lots of people die. The rest of the people become a workforce, and a few people are in charge. And that's what happens there. Next slide, please. Oops, one more back. Go back one, please. Okay, so with our own classical education, it began to change because an Austrian aristocrat headed up a symposium about Marxism. What they did was they developed, this happened in Germany, this was in the 1920s, And the group of them were really intent on something. What they wanted to do was take down the West. They actually were beginning a war. This was during, right after World War I, leading into World War II. They actually did not like free nations, and they wanted to spread their Marxism principles. And so in the 1930s and 40s, the founders of what was called the Frankfurt School, what had come from that council, fled to the United States with the aid of John Dewey and also Columbia University. They populated our teachers' college, Columbia University's Teachers College, and spread from there. And now it has spread to over 60% of all U.S. teaching and education positions. So if you've ever had a kid go off to college and he came home for a visit and you don't know who that kid was walking in the door, or nowadays that happens by the 5th grade, and you say, who is that child that's sitting across from me saying those horrible things to their mother? Where did that come from? They did not learn it in this house.
That's right.
That's why. Okay, because they learned that they can undermine the West by infiltrating it and teaching the children what they wanted to teach them. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. And so, how did the feds get involved? Well, you knew that the people that have now become politicians are in Washington, and what do politicians do best? Well, they stay politicians. And so what they did was, it was actually the Supreme Court that dealt the first blow. 1963, it was Abington versus Kemp. These graphs come from the Census Bureau. They're not invented, they're not made up, they're just the way it is. David Barton dragged these out, and he has them in a book called Original Intent. It's a great book about our judicial system and its history. What happened was the Supreme Court struck down the official use of the Bible in public schools, overriding states' rights, including the state of Massachusetts, who still used the Bible in its education system at that time. And it actually struck a major blow, because now the federal government was telling the states what they could and could not teach. That was not good. So what happened? Educational achievement, these are the SAT tests in the first graph. They were cruising along just fine in the 50s and early 60s, and as soon as that policy changed, they plummeted. Children started doing very poorly on this academic test. Teen pregnancies skyrocketed. And violent behavior, you can see, in teens also skyrocketed. At the same time that they removed God from school, they introduced sex in the form of health class, sex education, and also further rejected God, essentially by inferring that evolution, now I'm a scientist, so I learned all this stuff in school, that evolution superseded creation. It's no big deal to talk about evolution, but if you try to push out God when you do, there's a big difference. Okay, next slide, please. And so what happened in 65, the government also interfered further. They passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That's going to become really important. They supposedly did it to help all students do better. But what they did was interfere in our schools further. And then in 77, go ahead, you can continue it. In 77, they actually instated the Federal Department of Education against their own, what's the word I'm looking for? Against their, not wishes, but against their own ideas, basically. So, Joseph Calafino was, at the time, Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. He said any set of test questions, this was under Lyndon Johnson, by the way, that the federal government prescribed should surely be suspect as a first step towards national curriculum, and in its most extreme form, a national control of curriculum is a form of national control of ideas. That's not good. That takes away imagination, it takes away free thought, it takes away our chances to reach that American dream that Rachel was talking about. Next slide, please. Okay, so the birth of outcome-based education, and you can keep clicking, go ahead, clicking on. What that is, this was actually important. I have the report here. You can all look at it if you want to. What they did was they paired up with the labor force, and this was in the 1991. They made a report called What Work Requires of Schools. Basically, how do you get a workforce? So that's what they're looking for, is a workforce. This is what we have to understand at this point. And so instead, click it again, instead what they're going for what's called outcome-based education. So now it doesn't matter what they're teaching your children, knowledge doesn't matter, whether or not they can add, subtract, or spell, but is if they can come up with a desired outcome. What is that outcome? Well, it depends on who's writing the rules. That's the problem. So if the desired outcome is that everybody is going to be a farmer, then that would say this was a successful program. I wish it was that benign, but it's not. And so what they started doing was they took, and this was at the time that Sandra was writing the great standards here. So here we had fantastic standards in Massachusetts, okay, that you could test with achievement tests or academic tests. We had the Iowa test, we had, like she said, the NAEP test at the time for national level, but also the Iowa test, California achievement tests, etc. Those were testing knowledge. And they switched. They switched to these high stakes tests, which do not test the knowledge of your child. Instead, they're called assessments. They can't even call them a test. And what they are is testing really a thought process of your child. So if you looked at these, and I did at the time I was in Louisiana with my kids, we had the LEAP. As a scientist, I looked at the questions that the LEAP was offering to my child in the 4th or 5th grade, and they were A, incomprehensible, and B, they had no correct answers. And C, they were taken from scientific papers that those children could never perceive or understand or comprehend. They already were doing Common Core down there. And this was 15 years ago, okay, 20 years ago. So all these tests, when the moms got upset and when people and activists got involved, like Peg Luxick and Donna Hearn, and went and tested these tests, they were all supposed to be individual state-led and state-run, like our MCAS, and what happened was they took the questions from them and they found out that the questions were not only similar, but most of them were identical. So really, this is a national, these were national tests. They were fooling everybody in each state, pretending that they were individually thought up and individually suited for their children. Okay, go ahead next. So that's a big thing. All right, and just click it again. So, non-constitutional federal educational programs that exist today and that have existed over the years, you can see them all. We're most interested right now in the No Child Left Behind, the Race to the Top, which got us to accept the Common Core program, which now they've already changed the name in several states to Iowa Standards, Next Generation Sunshine Standards in Florida. And in 2015, at the very end, our own lovely state senators and congressmen passed the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is awful. Okay, so this is going to cement Common Core at the local level if we don't fight every step of the way. That is a huge act. It has thousands of pages, like most of the things they've been passing. It has provisions for a federal pre-K, which means they will be telling your child what to learn in pre-kindergarten. Part of that, by the way, will be sex, because we have here the National Sexuality Education Standards, and they start in kindergarten. Really? I don't think that's very nice. Okay? Parent re-education, home visits to determine compliance, redistribution of school taxes, mandatory federal mind mapping assessments of your kids. Okay, next slide, please. And they're proud of that it's mind mapping. They made them very happy. And so how's that working out for us at school so far? Well, these are some examples of things that parents have turned in. The top one is one of my favorites. My mom always nags me to clean my room. Nags is the correct answer. They wanted the children to actually learn inflammatory language that might make their parents angry. Is that reinforcing the American family? I don't think so. Okay, the health one, I don't even want to read it out loud, but it's true. They give these surveys to our 8th graders, and they're horrible. When you look at the survey, go to Mass Resistance. They have a website. They have procured this. It is question after question after question, as disgusting and filthy as that. And these are to children. They're giving these questions. Surveys. This survey came from someone out on Cape Cod. They wanted to know what kind of mail does your family get. Lists the places that send mail to your mom and dad. That's very intrusive in privacy. And history. CE and BCE. Does anybody know what that means? In this room, probably not, but your kids do. They have tried to change our calendar. There's no more before Christ and Anno Domini, the year of the Lord, AD and BC. They're trying to change it to Common Era and before Common Era. Now, just like the Frankfurt Institute, this was done at a meeting, at a yearly meeting. A handful of arrogant scientists thought it would be great to get Jesus out of, apparently, to get Jesus out of history. But the trouble is, what do you base Common Era on? Well, it's based on the birth of Christ. So I don't understand. There's no reason to do that except to literally erase God, to continue erasing God. Okay, so whether you're Christian or not, Jesus was a man who was born. If you're not a Christian, and that's still what our calendar is based on, that's just a fact. So to erase it is not very nice. And we're letting them do it. We're letting them do it and teach that to our kids. Next, please. Okay, let's move on. Oh, go back to the math. Thank you. Okay, science. I'm sorry, that's my favorite. All they're teaching your children is about climate change. I don't understand, because the climate has always changed ever since the earth was formed. But it's true, right? I love you. It's true. If the climate never changed on the earth, there would be no humans on the earth. This would be a ball of molten lava. The climate always changed, and it always will change. And when people come to you and say, man is causing all these horrible things, and that's all we need to teach our children because it's the most important thing in the world, that's not truthful. It's not truthful. The temperature of the earth is changing up and down slightly over the years, and I say slightly, that's geologically speaking, it's slight. But it's also going along with the changes in our planetary system, like Mars and Jupiter, okay, and even Pluto. We have no cows on Pluto. We have no cars on Mars. As another friend scientist says to me, this is the best way to put it to people, it's not the SUV, it's the SUN that's changing our climate, okay? And then the math. Sandra spoke about that, and that's the reason it makes no sense. It does not make sense. What they're doing is two things. One is they're making it so parents can't help their kids with their math, because it doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to make sense. It's supposed to teach them to do something without questioning it when it doesn't make sense. What they're making is perfect little robots, and I have been substituting. Last year I did some substituting at school. Mostly, frankly, I was out of work for a short time, but mostly so I can see what was happening at school. And I'll tell you the truth. At the kindergarten level and at the first grade level, those kids are perfect little robots already. They can follow the most complicated instructions. I did not have a clue what they were doing or what they were supposed to be doing when they went and got that bucket. It made no sense, no logical sense to do the activity that they were about to do. But they had a captain at the table, he led the charge, and somehow they followed through with the task. They are being taught to perform things without question. And I'm going to go back for a second to something that, who said this? Petra said, that it is life itself that we're talking about. And it truly is, because our children are being taught a culture of death this way. Because when you do things without asking why, when you do whatever somebody tells you and don't think of consequences or anything beyond, what happens? All the horrible things that do happen. The drugs, the cutting, the mercy killings, the whatever you want to call them, but they'll go off and do things that they don't think about because they're being taught to just listen and follow an instruction of anybody, of something that doesn't make sense. And then yet, let's move down the bottom just for a second. Our students can no longer read the following sentence because none of our children are being taught cursive anymore. They cannot read handwriting. And so, danger, do not drink the water, well, they won't know that. They also can't read our founding documents. They can never read the Declaration of Independence. Someone's going to tell them what's in it, and what are they going to tell them is in it? A lie, thank you. And they're not going to be able to read the letters you leave to them unless you block print them. Okay, thanks. Next, Dorothy. Okay, this actually, I'm going to go fast through it because all it is to show you how complicated the Common Core is, and I have two slides that will show it more simply. But it is not state-led. It comes from Washington. Those organizations that started it did it with federal money and Bill and Melinda Gates money. The National Governors Association and Council of Chief State School Officers are lobby groups. They are not educators. Okay? Achieve, they are not educators. And Sandra knows this. They did most of this behind closed doors. Keep going. go ahead, keep clicking through. There's our rotten apple that the kids are being fed through. Up in that corner are the people that were pushing it to begin with. They all took Bill and Melinda Gates' money. I'll show you how that works in a minute. And what they're going to come out with is information on your child and family, compliant workers, a controlled global workforce. That's actually what Bill and Melinda Gates loved. Bill Gates' father was a huge proponent of population control. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Can you hit one more time, Dorothy? And we'll just, thank you. Okay, so scientifically, my little flow chart essentially shows if you sat there and carefully looked at it, you could see all the components that have been put into this process. Your kids and the teachers are getting thrown in. The teachers hate this too. You all know it if you've talked to your kids' teachers, and teachers constantly tell us how awful it is, and they want to sign the petition, frankly. And what's lost forever? This is the only reason why I want to leave it up here. This is lost forever. God, family, and country, creativity and imagination of your children. The ones who have imagination are being squashed or put on Ritalin so that they just can't talk anymore during class. Discovery and excellence, gone. No more knowledge. They just have to follow the pattern. They're not going to learn anything, and they're not learning. We're losing our best teachers left and right. They are getting fired, or they're retiring because they can't do this to kids anymore. Privacy. We'll talk about that in a second. Morality obviously is gone. No more free thought, freedom, and the American dream. We're losing it all. We're losing it all. Okay, got next, thanks. Keep on again. We're not going to sit on this one. Can you hit it again? Yep, hit it again, so it'll just come out. Yeah. Okay, this is just to show you that I didn't make any of this up. This is all from the horse's mouth. This is from the Department of Education. These documents, or from the Bill and Melinda Gates website, from their own website, from the different organizations that we'll be discussing, the Department of Labor scans. I have them right here on the table. You could look at the original documents. We just had to put it together. We just had to figure out how to put it all together. Okay, next. And so, data. What do I talk about? Data. I said data. The last talk we gave, there was a lady in here started crying. She said, I can't even listen to this. I'm one of the data collectors at school. I feel like I'm working for the devil. And I'll tell you, as a substitute, kids were taken out of the, every time I substituted, children were taken out of class. They would come to the class, pick one or two kids, and ask me if they're going to take them for 30 minutes for data collection. This is all done without parental consent. In 2008 and 11, they changed the FERPA laws that were supposed to protect the parents and the children. And what they did was they removed the parents from the whole conversation. So all they have to do is go get the kid, and you don't even know they took your kid, and you don't know what they're asking them. It's evil. It is evil. So what are they asking them? Well, I know what they're asking them. I know some of it anyway, so I'll just share a little bit with you. From the student longitudinal data system, and this is it says it's statewide, but it actually is a national system because every state has to participate. That makes it national. It's a national database. And they even say, I'm going to just briefly tell you, besides the basic information specifically linked to your child, and I have that written up there, sensitive information will also be extracted from your children. That sounds so painful. And then they list political affiliations, beliefs of the student or the parent, mental and psychological problems of the student or the family, sex behavior, attitudes, illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, and demeaning behavior. And then I ask, are we talking about children or criminals here? I mean, what are they describing here? Legally recognized privileged relationships, such as if your family knows a lawyer or a physician or a minister, religious practices and affiliations, income, etc., etc. These are things that well, let me ask you, why would anybody need to know these things about your child or your family?
They don't.
They don't, thank you. I agree with you. They don't need to know them. And also, there's always more. These are examples of the biometric data collection that they are proposing for your children. And this is from a Department of Education. I have the book over there, okay? So facial expression cameras, those are on all the pads they're using. The pad looks at the child looks at the pad. They can determine how their eyes are moving back and forth across the page. The posture analysis seat and the pressure mouse and the wireless skin conductor are essentially lie detectors. When the kid gets nervous, it twitches and they can record that. It's so evil. Next slide, please. And so can we get better? Yes, let's get even worse. That was proposed. This is what they're doing. So in Washington, they've already tried testing all these things. Okay? What is this? What is actually going on with our kids? Well, press the button one more time, Dorothy, and I'll show you what's going on. There we go. They're lab rats and guinea pigs. My kid isn't, but that's what they're using our kids as. And I definitely think we have a big problem here. All right, don't worry, we're gonna end up on a happy note here, eventually. How could they possibly force this on an entire country, Dorothy? Oh wait, I'm nuts. That's what I forgot. I am a nut, right? I just thought I would put this in there because by now that's what you're all saying. She is a nut. All right, two more slides here, and I'm going to show a little more evidence because I'm a scientist. Let's follow the money. This is the grant money awarded to organizations from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for the Common Core. Anything in purple is actually federal tax dollars, but that means it's your money. Although you have no say in how to spend it. And look at the adoption. Those are the institutes that convinced us to adopt Common Core. Look how much money they took. 6.7 million, 37 million, on and on. Development, National Governors Association, etc. We had all those on our chart. Millions and millions of dollars. Implementation, well, Pearson writes all the books. They're going to get big kickbacks. You know how that goes. Millions of dollars. The National Education Association, the NEA, they're taking money. Validation, the Achievement, well, Sandra didn't get any, obviously. The Achievement Network, Teach Plus, these are all organizations that Massachusetts is really listening to. Enforcement, I call it enforcement because the tests are what will enforce this. Let me tell you this one thing real quick. When we went to Rhode Island to give the talk, one of the moms said, you know, my child had a test on that pad. She got to question 3 or 4. It said, do your mom and dad leave you home alone? She said, well, I'm not supposed to answer personal questions at school. The teacher said, you have to, or you can't, you'll get a 0 because it won't go to question 5. So the mom was furious. She came in, Sandra, you were at that forum that was down on Rhode Island. The mom was furious. She went in to ask the principal what's going on. She said, well, that's just the way it is, and that's what happens with these tests. You have to go. It's a progression. It's all online. It's computer-driven. The mom said, that's fine. I want to see the test. I want to know what questions my child was asked for this. And you know what the principal said? I'm sorry. We won't be able to accommodate you on that because depending on how your child answered one question, they would get a different question. Now, this is outcome-based education. It's a path that they're following in order to achieve a specific outcome. She said your child could have had 18,000 different possibilities of that test. That's what happens when the test is coming from someone that doesn't live here. All right, next page, please. Oh, we're not done with the money. I'm sorry, I thought we were done with the money, but we're not. Data collection, and then I say more. Those are the cheerleaders, and just like Sandra said, the Massachusetts Business Alliance for Education, who's suing us with the ballot initiative question, they're taking even more money from Bill and Melinda Gates. And here's the most troubling to me of all. Sandra, I don't know if you know this one yet. Nationwide, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is now funding millions and millions and millions of dollars towards, departments of education, state departments of education. Is that even legal? You know what for? Ours just took $5.7 million for teacher re-education. That's scary. Meaning, our teachers aren't going to comply and do this to your kids, so they're going to re-educate them so that they will. This is sounding more and more like a bad novel or a futuristic novel, and so that's what we truly are facing. What we need to do is go back to testing knowledge and not thought process. That's what we have to do, and dump all of this. Next slide, please. I'm getting there now. I'm almost done. Okay, why? Just click through. And these are just little scenes of all the things that have been happening over the years. That dad asked a question about Common Core, got arrested. And it's just kind of a summary of the kind of things they are doing to our children. There's a teacher who has become a robot. That robot's actually taken from a photo from Korea where the teachers actually are robots. So if you want to think we're headed there, we are headed there. And next slide, please. Obviously, oh, there we go. And remember, all the data they take on your child is personally identifiable, meaning they know who your child is and who you are. It's not just a survey. It's not just in general how are the children doing. It's your kid. And those files are going to follow that child all the way through their life, through the workforce, and the child's teacher, as Sandra was talking about too. Okay. Next slide, please. Since you have the slides, I think we're getting there. All right, so in summary, we talked about outcome-based education. It just is called Common Core now, but it's been around since the 40s. Really, in our schools since the 60s. It is Marxist-based. It's driven by the combined forces at this time of big government, labor, and powerful special interests like Bill and Melinda Gates. Is their goal to nurture morally educated citizens? I'm going to think not. Or to obtain compliant workers. Can this type of program benefit your child and family? Can it encourage creativity and excellence? Can someone be common and brilliant at the same time? Dr. Penluxick put it a great way. We can't all be concert pianists, but we can all screech off key in the shower. And what they're doing is making it so that our children can never do anything but screech off key in the shower. Our kids are never going to be scientists. I'm a scientist. With the math they're giving them, what they call math, the consensus, whatever, they will never achieve any scientific intent. They won't be able to do it. They can't do physics. They can't do chemistry. It just isn't going to happen. I want you to know that Bill and Melinda Gates' children go to a school that does not teach the Common Core. So that's a great way to put it. Okay, so action plan. This is a little bit long, but I have a much shorter one coming up. But these are the things we've been doing now for several years. Okay? Talk to people. Take the pamphlets home with you. Give them to your friends and neighbors and family. Help to educate them. And keep the discussion going. You can do it in many ways. You can actually run for office. Seriously, you can. And be school committee members. And you can actually, if your school committee members won't listen to you, become your school committee members and your legislators. Okay? And I say handwrite letters to your state reps and to the administration because you can inform them that they won't be able to read it if they were taking school right now. And their children won't be able to read it. Next slide, please. And 3 things that we can do right this minute. We can support candidates that fully reject the Common Core, so look who's running for office, and if they promise to fully reject it, to get control back locally to the schools and reject all federal programs, then support them, please. Join the fight by helping the End Common Core Massachusetts group, and make sure to vote yes on the ballot initiative question in November, and to tell your friends and neighbors to do that as well. And the most important thing for me is to refuse this plan for your children and community. Sandra put me onto this years ago. She said civil disobedience, and little Sandra standing up there saying that, I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's saying that. But really, after all these years of fighting, that's what we have to do. We have to just say no. Just no. And on the next slide, I'll show you how you can do that. Wait, don't switch yet though. You went too fast. I said I will show you, but I'm not ready to show them. Okay. Just remember, we have to ignore the threats about losing funding. It's your money that they're extorting you with. Okay, there are other schools, there are other choices for our kids. We just have to say forget the money. If everyone in the country said forget it, they'd be at a loss. They couldn't keep doing it to us.
Accepting the money is bribery.
Yes, it is bribery. Thank you. That's exactly right. So this is my quote. Would we sell out the hearts and minds and souls of our children for anything? Then why are we giving them away for nothing? Because we're getting nothing back, frankly, but a culture of death. And people walk by and sometimes people won't sign that and they'll say to me, I'm all set, I don't have any kids. I say, really? What's going to happen when you're in the emergency room and you look up and see one of those Common Core math kids above you with a scalpel? Oh, it is true. It is true. Right. You can't even, if the register glitches at Walmart, nobody can give you change. Because the children haven't been taught how to count out change. It's so simple to do. Okay, now though, we can go to the end. Dorothy, thank you. Dorothy, thank you so much for this. Okay? Alternative school resources, they do exist. And they don't cost money, some of them. For example, towards the Cape, a little far, but it's kind of halfway between you people and us, there is a New Testament Christian school. I'm sure there are other Christian schools in your area that you can find that will refuse federal money and refuse Common Core. Hillsdale College refuses federal money, okay? But not only that, they're awesome and they have several sister colleges for your children. They're very reasonably priced. They take no federal money. They give an honest classical U.S. education. But I will say they've come up with a fantastic thing. It's called the Hillsdale Academy K-12 curriculum. It's free. It's free online. They will give it to you because they want to rescue your children and they want to have great kids coming into college later. So you can, with a group of friends, get that online for free and start teaching your kids at home or start little schools in your area. Liberty Chalkboard is thinking of doing that next year or the year after. It depends what happens. But we really want to because that would be a great way to go. Okay? Again, in God we trust. And I just want to say thank you very much for being patient with me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Common Core. Do we want our children to be common? That's the question. Right now, we're going to watch a short presentation on film from Dr. Duke. What is it last name? Hester, yes. And he's going to tell us a lot more about Common Core. And after that, we'll be entertaining questions from you. So while you're watching this film, make sure you maybe take out your paper and pencil, write down questions. Be sure when you go home that you talk to your neighbors, your family, and other people about Common Core and about our responsibility to our children as adults to make sure that we have the best information about the standards that our children are being held to. So are we ready for that presentation?
It's not bringing up a web browser.
It is not? Okay.
I thank everyone for coming, okay? And I think that one thing I want to say that you brought out today, Mary Ellen, is that they're teaching our children, they're dumbing them down, okay, for the most part. And what is happening is that they want their mind. They are going to make them robots if we let them. But the good thing is this, that it doesn't have to happen. If we listen, we hear what is being said, what is being shouted on the mountaintops. We hear shouting. It doesn't appear as anyone's hearing us, but we are shouting. And it is going to reverberate because I know that people are going to understand eventually. Because, see, we are sleeping giants right now. That's unfortunate. When we sleep, they put in whatever they want to. But when we awake, there is going to be awakening. Because, as I said, with that we're having, dumbing us down, doing the things that they're doing, they have already instituted at third grade, if you can't read, you're going to jail. That is what they're saying. They're already saying that a lot of people cannot in this community, that we can't learn. They've been saying that for years and years and years. And they're just coming upon that to try to just, we're learning MCAS, but now they say, no, we don't want you to learn MCAS now. We're going to now take you into Common Core. Common Core is now going to throw another fly in the ointment to stop us from even understanding MCAS. Now we have to go and learn something else. With the Supermax, with the privatization of our jails, with all that good stuff going on, all it's going to be is we are going to be fodder for the prisons. We will be fodder, and that's unfortunate because we need to be able to make sure that people understand our children are not pieces of meat. They're not just throwaways because that's what they want us to think. Our children have so much inside of them because God created them in His image and in His likeness. He created them, and if God is creative, God said, let there be, and there was. And so with His own creativity, we are made in His image and likeness. We are just like Him. And so therefore, God is not making us robots. He gave us free will. Who is man to say, we are going to take away your free will and we're going to let you do what we want you to do? If God, who is almighty and omnipotent and knows everything universal, God, and He said, I'm going to give man free choice. This to me, like you said, you went back to even to the communists, to Karl Marx and all that, and how it's going to impinge upon us, to hurt us. And no longer are we going to be people. No longer are we going to be thinking about families. No longer are we going to want to know that our families are being torn apart piece by piece by piece by piece. And unless we continue to shout, it doesn't matter if it's one person, it doesn't matter if it's two people, but we're going to shout it out on the mountaintops. We're going to shout it out, and I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you took your time. Rachel, Mary Ellen, Mary Ann, and Sandra, thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless each and every one of you all to take the time just to come here to tell us that this is something that is so important to you, that you are fighting. You're fighting the good fight of faith. The good fight of faith. Rachel made such great statements. She is a product of this here system. But it wasn't like it was now. At least you had that opportunity to go and to learn and to excel. And what I found out with this Common Core, it does want you to be common because it wants every child to be alike. No one to excel, no one to do better than anybody else. In one place, I think they said that, you know what? No more cum laude, none of that. They don't want any distinction. If someone's doing better than your child, no, every child is doing the same. And that's why they say all things are the same. They tell you that. They want you to be just like anybody else, Joe Smo. So please, I know I'm talking to the choir. I know that. And I know I'm just knowing that you all are so great and so wonderful to be here. But we have to continue to go out there and to tell everyone that this is it's more than disgraceful. It's more than, it's unconscionable what is happening. It just doesn't make any sense, and it's important that we understand that God is on the throne. He hasn't given up on us. We're not going to give up on Him, okay? Because He wins in the end, okay? And if we stand by our guns and we stand up tall, and as you said, there's so many alternatives. So we have to take those alternatives and move with it. And as well as with Rachel, if she can become what she is, and a lot of us, we're products of the public school systems, okay? A lot of us are. And if we can be part of the public school system and gravitate and become more, then we want the best for our children. This is about children. This is about lives. And I'm hoping that we have accomplished something today. And I know that at this point, that people are going to go back home. They're going to say, listen, you should have came. You should have came. This was an awesome, awesome event. So with that, I'm asking us to just don't give up and don't give in. And that's not the one I want. So please.
But you got the right school.
Please.
Examine the dangers of Common Core?
No, I don't want that one. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, we're going to get into some questions until they find the exact video that we'll watch. Petra did say something that's so true. We may be preaching to the choir. However, this is being recorded, so many people, something about our communities is that you have to hear something over and over and over before you actually realize how intense the moment is. And with us being here today and filming this, maybe we could get this information. I posted it on Facebook, some of your speeches, and I've already got some hits. So we're going to keep reposting, and educating our communities about Common Core standards. It's simple. I worked on a Stop the BU Bioterror Laboratory, which was doing some work to bring things like Ebola back to Boston to do studies on a micro level. And it took a handful of people, but they kept this out of our city for over 11 years. And it takes being consistent and persistent and about what you believe in. Now, this Common Core, it reminds me of a movie that I've seen a lot of times, A Brave New World. You know, you have the alphas, you have the betas, you have the deltas, and you stay in your spot. And I believe this is what Common Core is trying to create. People at certain levels who don't have any inalienable rights that we know that we have in this country. And to protect those rights, we need to really stand up and be heard. Now, I'd like the panelists to come back to the front, and we're going to ask a few questions, get some answers on video so that we can share it with our communities. So I want to welcome again Rachel Kemp.
We're ready. Oh, the video's ready.
It is ready? Okay. Okay, so we'll watch that first, and afterwards we'll have you all come to the podium, to the table.
There's so many things to do in California. Thank you for spending Friday here. Wednesday? Sorry. It's funny in Wisconsin. So I'm glad that you're here tonight. And I also want to just take a quick moment and thank Pastor Cliff for letting us, free of charge, be able to have this talk here today. It's a wonderful service to the community. We appreciate it very much. Real quick while I'm here, can I ask, do we have any teachers here or school board members? We do have some teachers here, fantastic. Do we have anybody running for office here today? And we do, okay, so we have some people here, great. I always like to preface my my talks by saying a few things. Helen's right. I've given about 450 of these talks now in 43 states. I have testified before 19 different state legislatures about Common Core. This talk is a little broader than that, but I want to assure you at the outset that Common Core and what's happening in our schools is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. It is much, much bigger than that. Right? I like to phrase what's going on in the schools as a Washington, D.C. versus the rest of us problem. It doesn't matter what political party we send up there. The fact remains is that each party moves this agenda forward. And what's really at stake here is who controls public schools. The reality is that the public school system should be public, meaning it belongs to the moms and dads. The primary stakeholders of education are the families and the kids who go to these schools. And over the last 40 years, that we have gotten as far away from that model as possible. Centralized, regulated, overregulated, federalized, needlessly expensive, ideological. Now you're bringing in all sorts of data gathering and bean counting for all sorts of organizations that have nothing to do with the welfare of your kids. And so what I'd like to do today is I'll give you an explanation of what Common Core is, but I'm going to do it in a broader context. Now that we're 6 years into the Common Core era, and you have to remember, no state in this union was consulted about Common Core. No state contributed to the writing of the standards. But these standards were put in place before anybody in your state had a chance to see them. These standards have never been tested anywhere in the world. The idea that they've been benchmarked, you keep hearing from the people who support Common Core that it's better than what you have. I will prove to you definitively that that can't be so because the people who created it will tell you it wasn't tested. It's never been done anywhere. So we're going to take a long look at Common Core. I would like to step back, though, and point out that, unfortunately, I suppose, in my life, the one thing that I've seen more parents upset about than anything in my 45 years on this planet is Common Core. So, I mean, it's a good thing. Common Core has awakened more parents. It's caused more controversy. It's got more families involved in education than at any time in my life. Not even sex ed curriculum in the 70s was as controversial as what's going on now. So that's the good thing. People are turning out. But the one problem we have is that people often think that Common Core is exclusively the problem. That if we were to get rid of Common Core, the schools would be just fine. And I would like to step back a little bit to demonstrate to you how we got here. Because Common Core is a problem, but it is a symptom too. For 40 years now, and really the real problems began in the late 1970s when we created the Federal Department of Education. We had managed to educate American kids for 100 years and give them arguably the best education in the world. The American educational system was the envy of the world through the 1960s. It wasn't until we created the Federal Department of Education, you can chart it on a graph. Our kids' performance really in all areas of education have gone down since we created this monolithic federal department. And if we understand anything about oversized government, generally speaking, when you get these big federal bureaucracies, they're expensive, everything goes up, way too much control, and usually the quality of what they do diminishes, and that's exactly true here. I'd like to go back as we begin the talk to this fellow. This is John Gruber. He is one of the prime architects of the new healthcare legislation, so-called Obamacare. And again, over the course of this talk, we will be talking about Democrats, Republicans. The blame is unilateral across the board. But what Mr. Gruber, after the Obamacare legislation was put in, you remember Nancy Pelosi's famous statement that you have to pass this law to find out what's in it. Only after the law was on the books did Mr. Gruber, who was one of the architects of Obamacare, come out in November of last year and say this.
A law which said healthy people are going to pay in, you made explicit that healthy people pay in and see people get money, and we're not passed. Okay? Just like to have people transparent, lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting things passed.
Call it lack of transparency was the only way we got that healthcare law in. If we had told the voters what was in it, if we allowed you to vote on whether or not you wanted it, it never would have passed. Lack of transparency is key to getting all this stuff done. And what Ms. Pelosi said is exactly right. Nobody read that bill. 26,000 pages. Nobody read that bill before it was passed. And yet, Common Core, the healthcare law was a model of transparency compared to how Common Core was put in your schools. At least C-SPAN held hearings on Obamacare before it became law. You had the Supreme Court weigh in on it. You had both sessions of Congress, the Senate and the House, talked about and debated Obamacare. None of that was done with Common Core. I would argue that what's going on in your schools is every bit more transforming than what's going on with healthcare. And yet no one ever had a vote on it, nobody ever heard about it. Common Core was in 46 states before anybody knew what the words were. And here we are 6 years into Common Core. And can I just ask by a simple show of hands, 6 years into the Common Core era, how many of you would still say you have no real idea what it is? And then, if you look around, we're talking 60% of the audience. 6 years into Common Core and nobody knows. I'm going to stop calling public schools public. Because if they were public, they belong to you. They'd have to ask your permission. They'd get your objective, your vote on this. They did. I'm going to start calling them government schools. Because that's what they are. Again, what Mr. Gruber, in a moment of honesty, said about how big bureaucracies get this stuff put in, by not telling you, by hiding it from you, by telling you, we'll let you know what's in it after you read it. That's exactly what happened here with your educational system. And I would argue, even if you think you like Common Core, can we, as free people, countenance the way it was put in? Are we still free people if things like this that impact all of our public, 60 million American school kids, if that provenance for this has nothing to do with us? Are we really a free people anymore? Go all the way back to World War II and prior to World War II. Everybody knows you can go to every state in this union, almost any big city in the country, and you will find monuments and memorials to the two founders of American public education. The two names you hear again and again are Horace Mann and John Dewey. Every community almost has a Horace Mann school. And we must understand that the founding fathers made no provision for public education, none. Because they understood that if you put the federal government in charge of education, inevitably the federal government would educate for its dictates, its needs and necessities, not the needs of the people. So it wasn't until quite long after the founding documents that Horace Mann, in the late 19th century, conceived of American public school. Do you know the model he used for American public schools, Horace Mann, the father of our schools? The Prussian militaristic dictatorial model. American public schools were based off the 19th century totalitarian Prussian regime, the regime that gave rise to Hitler. And what was the purpose of education in totalitarian Prussia in the 19th century? It was not to provide reading, writing, and arithmetic to kids. It was to school them in obedience to the state. That was the model. As a matter of fact, here's what Horace Mann said in 1858 about American public schools. After a child has arrived at the legal age for attending school, whether child of noble or of peasant, the only two absolute grounds of exemption from attendance are sickness and death. We who are engaged in the sacred cause of education are entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause. Right from the get-go, American public schools. The argument here is this one, and then of course John Dewey, the philosopher and card-carrying communist, I might add John Dewey was. I mean, not a pretend communist. He actually had a card for the party. Outside of Horace Mann, he is the single most influential figure in American public schools. And in the mid-1930s, here's what John Dewey said the purpose of your public schools were for. The children who know how to think for themselves spoil the harmony of the collective society which is coming, where everyone would be interdependent. Do you understand what the common in Common Core means 80 years later? The common in Common Core means every kid gets the same education now. And that may sound liberating, but not if the education overall is lower. What do you have to sacrifice? You got 60 million American school kids. Let's do just a simple basic math problem here. You're going to get 60 million kids to exactly the same place in every subject. By definition, is that going to be a lower or a higher standard? It has to be. That's what they're talking about. The purpose of education is not to allow your kids to become what they can be. It's not to awaken in them a love of learning, to turn gifted young math students into mathematicians, or kids who can write well into writers. That was never the intention of this. The common in Common Core means that. We are sacrificing children's individuality. Not every kid is good at math. Not every kid is good at history. Not every kid writes well. So what? Let those kids use school to become what they're good at, right? Everybody gets a basic education. I was horrible at math in school, right? But I could, when I was in third grade, I could write at high school level. That's what I do now, right? The world needs more than CPAs. And the reality is that the premise of this from Dewey, from Horace Mann, is that the purpose of schools, well, let's go a little further, I'll show you. How about the National Education Association?
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed your little presentation.
Okay, we are going to ask our panelists if they would come and sit at the table, and so that we can get a few questions and answers on our media, and that way it would allow us to reach hundreds and thousands of more people in the city of Boston. There's a lot of good material up at the desk at the front there. Make sure you look at it. A copy of the United States Constitution. My first question to our panelists, and we'll start with you, Sandra. What is your number one solution that you put forward when you give your presentation and talk about Common Core? What's the first thing or last thing you want our audience or people to take away as something they can do and start doing as a solution?
That's a tough question, one thing. There's a ballot question in November that has been